Our next presentation deals with using virtual testing to drive innovation in merchandising. Our speaker is Jenkin Lee, Head of Product at InContext Solutions. Jenkin, take it away.
Thanks, John. Good afternoon, everyone. Assuming that you're in an afternoon in whatever time zone you're calling in from. I'm excited to hopefully live up to the expectation of best for last. We're going to talk about some cool tech, but unlike how Trey mentioned in the last presentation, hopefully not as shiny as some of the technologists out there think that virtual reality is. And in this case for us and all of us in the CPG space, it'll be around how we can apply virtual reality to make it as essentially as profitable as a tool for any of us that are stewards of merchandising, retail, and the ancillary areas of the businesses. Everyone always asks me, who the hell are you? And so I'll give a quick intro that name's Jenkin. I've been working at InContext for about 2 years, and in terms of what product development means for us, it's really making sure that we can apply this technology, this virtual reality, and all forms of virtual and other related technologies to create useful use cases, to create a positive ROI, to create a great story and a great solution to do things better than we've done in the past. And that's basically what anyone who has a technology wants to do, and that's what the product function at InContext is responsible for. I lead that, and so I'm excited to share today.
Hopefully, you and I won't need to speak again unless there's a problem, but I want to thank you. You've been a great help today.
Linda, you're online.
I'm so excited to be part of some bloopers. It's never happened to me on a webinar, so great. I got another notch on my belt. Anyway, in any case, enough about me now for the company. We are a small company, but we have global impact. And the main premise of our business is to help the stewards of retail build ideas, help create ideas, visualize ideas, then test those ideas, and then bring those ideas to life. And of course, because we're applying new technologies, we do things in a better, faster, stronger, faster, cheaper, and less risky way. And I think the best way to talk about our business and talk about how the industry is leveraging this technology is really in 4 sections. First is speaking a little bit about the technology itself. The second is understanding what that technology has done for retail, and we really like to focus on the management and retailing side story for category management and visual merchandising and those types of responsibilities. The third is always people want to know, well, does it work and what happened and have you used it before? So we're going to talk about that. And then lastly, what are the tools, what's the software, and what's InContext doing to make this successful and a repeatable and scalable process for business. So if all is good with that, which I will just assume it is, a question for everyone to start us off. Have you heard of virtual for retail? And if everyone on the line could, I'll give everyone a few seconds to put an answer in there. Would love to see what our audience thinks. Got 40 folks on the phone, and we got 11 answers in. I'll give it 5 more seconds, and then we will understand how representative sample works as a group here. I will personally select yes because I'm in the business. And here we go. So this is what you all said. Majority of folks have heard. Fortunately, looking at the list here, it's not just internal InContext folks. That's actually a great story. And then it's funny because we actually see that the next is, I think so, but I'm not sure what it means. And that's actually the answer we get from the majority of our clients, where everyone's like, yeah, I've heard of virtual. Maybe they've heard it from they're actually outside of the industry from their kids, because the gaming industry pioneers a lot of technologies. But what are you doing for retail? What are you doing for my business? And how is that going? So we got 20 responses in here so far, and that story seems consistent. So I'll give you a little bit of an answer. And part of it is that the way we've leveraged technology. And I love this picture because what you're looking at here on the right side of the slide is what the old workspace used to look like for folks that were responsible for CAD drawings. And so when it was time to make plans and blueprints and architecture work, this is all the space and paperwork and manual labor that was involved in making these decisions. And I don't know what screams out to everyone here, but a couple of the always reactions here are, wow, there's so many people, and two, look at all that paper. And one of the beautiful things that we've done with virtual is we've likened this analogy to a lot of what happens in store planning, and we've taken a lot of that out of the process. And you'll see just here in a moment, I have a video for you guys where you can see what virtual brings to the retail world. So I'll play this video. It's about just about a minute, and it has some audio, so I'll take a pause here.
At InContext Solutions, our enterprise retail optimization platform, Shopper MX, is helping take merchandising to new heights. Brands and retailers are leveraging virtual simulations to visualize, test, and bring winning in-store concepts to market fast, providing a risk-free space to iterate and collaborate with internal teams and external partners. In fact, working in mixed reality means you can see new concepts within the context of a store. Shopper MX also enables real-time decision-making through virtual shopping simulations and data collection, providing both behavioral and attitudinal insights on changes, including packaging redesigns, shelf arrangement, new displays, and aisle flow. What better way to analyze that data than in an immersive, lifelike space?
So what we just saw was basically the ability to create a 3D concept, to visualize that in a 3D display, take that 3D display, and then further visualize that in a 3D environment of any sort. And so the beauty there is that we were able to do all of that with the benefits of virtual reality and 3D modeling and a lot of the technologies that the gaming industry has already pioneered. And we're able to take that and immediately, hopefully that communicates to everyone that, wow, I didn't need an innovation center for that. I didn't need to do any artist renderings for it. And in the future, I would love to have this webinar next year, and for anyone who's on the phone that has a head-mounted device at home, we can actually have this presentation virtually in a store of our choice. And just, when you pause to think for a moment, that's incredibly wild, and we've never seen anything like that, and that's something that we are definitely working towards. But anyway, back on our agenda, it's a quick snippet of how the technology is enabling companies to do things differently. And the biggest thing that we've seen, and this is more of just an industry thing, this has nothing to do with InContext, but we've seen about $15 billion taken away from the center of store, big CPG, and it's all the ankle biters, it's all the nibbling around the edges by the smaller companies. We know markets are being fragmented by newer, innovative, smaller brands, and in total share, it's a huge chunk. And so another question for anyone is, do you use virtual for anything at all in terms of any testing? And so I only actually expect the handful of folks that have heard for virtual in the prior question to answer, but we'll take a small sample size and we'll just I'll use that knowledge for later. And in my case, I use it for a whole bunch of things, but that's okay, and we'll submit. And as expected, given the majority of our users didn't know, we see no here. So I'm just going to keep that in mind and park that factoid for a moment. But going back to the idea of small businesses innovating and doing things, just to take some examples just on the top of mind, Chobani, Halo Top, Dollar Shave Club, these were very, very small brands, and it was very, very unlikely that they would be successful in a marketplace that was dominated by big CPG. Yet they've pioneered this movement of small brands being successful. And the common thread here that it's important to note is that they're successful. Obviously, they have unique product propositions, but they're also doing new things with technology in the way that they're looking at consumer loyalty and purchase influence data, the way they're applying data to make smarter decisions and less gut reactions, how they're looking at how they do their merchandising and pricing strategies, and then lastly, how they re-merchandise the in-store experiences. And I think we've all, if any of us have been in a retail environment recently, we can all acknowledge that, yes, things look differently than they have been in the past. And so we know that this level of innovation is driving change. It's leading to success, and I'm about to tell you in a moment how virtual is a part of that story. Two facts that I think are really important that are often lost on folks in the industry is that 86% of retail traffic will still be in store in the coming years. So brick and mortar is here, and it's common. And I was reading, and this stat is about a year old from some article that was published, and I just read the other day that 20% of e-commerce might grow to 20% by 2025. Right, so it's not like we're on a cliff or precipice of this trends changing. We know it's slow, yet we see all the focus on e-commerce because that is where there's the highest opportunity to influence. We've almost convinced ourselves that that's where the change needs to come from. It's not going to come from brick and mortar, and therefore brick and mortar often doesn't get looked at as critically or as opportunistically as the e-commerce space will be. So keep that in mind. And then the other fun fact is that 85% of the labor at shelf is unproductive. And I think anyone that has a category management hat on will be nodding in their chair right now because they know, yes, the last 10 campaigns we tried, the last 10 initiatives we tried, we barely moved the needle. And a lot of this change is obviously, one, because change is risky, and risky change is therefore discouraging to make that change, and therefore we decide to make smaller changes, and it's this race to the bottom in terms of how bold our decisions end up being. And so this brings us into the next point of today, which is how do we embrace technology, especially with virtual, in the process of implementing and influencing brick and mortar for innovative change. Obviously, everyone has different words for these, but the basic, I have an idea, is ideation. I want to vet or test my idea, and then I want to bring my idea into market. Everyone knows the tools. There's a lot of 2D imagery and planograms. There's a lot of in-store tests if we have the budget and we're lucky. Otherwise, we'll do some other smaller concept tests. And then, of course, there's a variety of activation tools to bring those ideas into market. And the opportunity for virtual is to be able to bring those to life and test more successfully with all those benefits of scale, that what I mentioned earlier. So you see here in the bottom left, it's a 3D environment. And seeing a 3D image on a screen and seeing a 2D image on a screen is often seen similarly because your screen is 2D. So you're not really benefiting the full effect of 3D. But if you're using 3D hardware like a head-mounted device or even a larger display, the context of what you're seeing becomes much more enriched and becomes much more immersive. And because of that, now we can apply online measurement and a lot of derived telemetry to understand true evaluation. And the last piece is, in order to bring in-store activation implementation, you also get the level of realism associated with that as well. So if I go a little deeper into this, we've kind of, after working with our clients over the years, we've kind of assessed that there's 7 essentially steps to the category review process. Everyone has slightly different names, but every time I show this to someone, everyone's nodding and like, yep, that's basically what we're doing, right? So I won't belabor the effect too long, but we know that there's some level of category definition, refinement, identification. Then it turns into a strategy opportunity to decide what needs to happen to set or redevelop any of those dynamics, and you just know that there's so many people involved in that process, it becomes very heavy. And then once some decisions are made, we go ahead and assess. We get some KPIs together. We measure things against those KPIs. We revisit the strategy, and then we try and implement what we've learned. And if you look here on the bottom, there's I don't need to add it up, but it just translates into a hell of amount of time. And if I round up, this is 1 year, and 1 year is a lot of time. And it's often easy to overlook what 1 year means because time doesn't get a direct relationship to your accounting department. It is a non-tangible, but it's what does 1 year in market earlier mean, right? No one really has a strong definition to that, but people know. Well, all the other aspects are itemized into pricing. So time is of the biggest value here, and it shouldn't be ignored. And so when we can apply technology, especially a virtual one, we can increase the amount of collaboration, increase the amount of visualization, and those increases lead to decreases in time. So as we move along the process, the assessments become easier. And sorry about that. The assessments become easier, and then obviously because that's the start of the process, everything kind of waterfalls from there. So a question to ask everyone is, well, should be an obvious question, but it is an important one. Do you wish you had more confidence in concept testing? And part of this is not only just to obviously lead the witness and say, yeah, wouldn't we all be more confident, but is to really have everyone have the opportunity to say, well, am I even confident in what I have right now? Does it matter? Because so often we're limited to the tools of what we have. You don't really have a chance to question your confidence, and you don't really know that is something that you can actually influence. Fortunately, I didn't have to make a story up because the data looks, right, we've all been in this scenario, the data looks good. People want more confident concept testing. And so there's good news, and I'll share that in a minute in terms of how you might leverage virtual or anything else to do that. So yes, we all want concept testing. Great, what do we do? Before I answer, here's one more question for you. And the question is, do bold ideas around new ways to merchandise get shut down out of fear? This one I'm curious on. What is the experience of the group here when proposing bold ideas, when proposing change that might be a little scary? I'd be very curious to know if organizations are receptive to this. I imagine the larger the organization folks are responding from, the scarier it might be, but we will find out. And my personal experience is, yeah, bring the data. Otherwise, we're just fumbling with opinions, as they say. All right, so not too much of a surprise here. A lot of people, yes, my bold ideas get shut down. Of course, data always helps. And so when I tie this to the last question, how do I get, I can interpret it as how do I get more confidence so that I can, if I were to re-answer this question in the future, I would, select no. And so as we continue along our process that I started explaining about, this is when virtual starts to see the biggest benefits around setting a strategy. And then, of course, after that, helping with InStore Setup. And this is the biggest piece that I like to emphasize with virtual is, a picture's 1,000 words, but when you show someone a picture, everyone always says, well, I still need to be there. And I can bring you there with virtual. I've never heard someone say, after getting into a head-mounted device, after experiencing a virtual immersive experience, say, yeah, I still want to see the store. The response I get, and I was at CES in January, and we put a whole bunch of industry and non-industry people in the headset, and 90% of the response is, holy shit, it's like I'm in the store. And it's literally, and I didn't even believe it until I was in the store, and I had the same reaction, and so I always laugh about myself that way. But the idea is, the brain takes 7 to 9 seconds for it to adapt to a new environment. It's incredibly compelling to think that I can teleport you to any retail environment that's built, and you will believe and see as if you are in that environment. And so when it comes to being able to, all the efficiencies around doing that, you're at zero, because you've already done that during your earlier assessment phase. And then the second part of this is the testing. So if any of us are lucky enough to have a big budget where there is $250,000 available, and I have a strong retailer relationship, and they don't mind being disrupted for about 24 weeks so I can get pre and post readings of a new product, and my stock boys are bringing the product on site, and the inventory didn't mess up, and it's being delivered on time, then I might get a good control store test. But you know how expensive and how many people and how much time and how much confidence I have in that process? Because I can put you in a virtual state, I can also do that with remote consumers. So I can have 500 consumers, 1,000 consumers, 2,000 consumers come into a virtual retail environment, shop it as if they would, and not only get scanner data, which is what I would get on my control store test, but I would also get telemetry. I would get my stated data, derived data, attitudinal questions, survey questions, and all this other stuff that everyone always wants but never gets. And it's even more expensive to do it because then you'd have to qualitatively source that in-store with the creep that's behind the mystery shopper to ask all those additional questions. So all of that is null and brought to zero, and that's the exciting premise around virtual research that no other methodology of research can really answer appropriately. And so that's the in-store test that I just mentioned. It's obviously bringing a dramatic decrease in time because it's administered over the internet. And then lastly, the implementation of it is the visual communication, whether it's to your retailer partners, whether it's to your boss, or whoever else needs to know how this is implemented, including the folks in the retail environment that are carrying out the operational changes. So we've saved a boatload of time, and that brings me to the third point, which everyone says, okay, great, I like the idea. You've excited me about the process. I conceptually get the idea of what you guys are doing. Does it work? Have you ever partnered with anyone? Have you ever seen a result, hold true? And fortunately, we have a business because the answer is yes. And the methodology of what we're doing has been validated. We've done it conceptually from the academic standpoint. We've done it with a retailer. We've also done it with a manufacturer. And one of our biggest virtual tests was a very large retailer that everyone always wants to work with. And they challenged us, and they didn't believe our methodology. And so we decided to do a test with them, and graciously they did a controlled store test alongside with us. And we learned, we're very happy with the results because we tried to break the methodology, if you will, by being very critical about the setup, very surgical about the implementation, and it turns out that both the physical control store test, the expensive version, and our virtual version showed, one, an increase that was very tightly correlated, and two, a similarly directional change of both of an increase. And when we looked at the brand and SKU level changes, which is always the hardest piece because of sample variances and stuff, if you're an inside folk, you'll get that. A very high correlation, of 0.91 sales data correlation, and that was phenomenally astounding. And then we decided to do it again a few years later, and the same result. So we were very confident in it. And then everyone always asks because of that, okay, well, what's the ROI you bring? And I said, you know what? Screw the ROI. Let the numbers speak for themselves. A control store test versus a virtual test. There's a dollar sign to figure it. You figure that out. There's the weeks that it takes to do control store tests. There's the days that it takes to do it online, and then there's the additional data that you get by doing an online test that has all the telemetry that can be captured. So that obviously speaks to a high ROI. I'm going to let the numbers speak for themselves. You can make the judgment call if this is significant enough to make an impact for your business. Now, that's the tangible ROI. These are the things that accountants like to keep track of, and this is what KPIs for campaigns and what have a good eye on. What they don't have a good eye on is the other non-tangible, intangible ROI pieces. And the first thing is that there is confidence in the decision, right? Using virtual or any other technology using it virtual in and of itself does not give you a better outcome. Right, let's just be very clear about that. There's a lot of confusion, like, oh, if I do more testing, I'll get better outcomes. No, taking a test more time does not make you a smarter student. That never happens. But by taking a test more time, it allows you to test different ideas. And that's the biggest observation that we're making into the market is everyone intrinsically knows that bold ideas bring great change. But what we don't know is that which bold idea is going to do that great change, because the bold ideas sit at the ends of the distribution. It's either going to be a colossal fail or it's going to be a wild success, and so because of the risk associated with both, we end up shimmying ourselves to the middle, and that's why, if we remember a couple polls ago, people said, yeah, I don't want to, I'm a little nervous around making that change. So because we have efficient and affordable and very predictable and accurate and robust research, now I can be really confident in the change that I'm making. And that means I can put more horses in the race. Now I can have bolder ideas. And then I can be able to see which of those bold ideas will have an impact. So very impressively, we've seen, anything, everyone in the industry knows, anything above 1% is wildly successful. So, the fact that we can see, and obviously there's some, increased bias because this assumes full distribution because it's an online test, yada, yada, yada. Okay, footnotes aside, we see real bold ideas come through successfully, and our clients really see and are seeing the same exact result. And so what do they do? They test more. And what happens? because it's online and the benefits of the tech, they can make these decisions faster, more confident, implement the change, and actually see a net result. So it's because they have embraced this technology as an enabler to a new way of thinking and a new way of innovating, they are seeing really positive results. So that's the takeaway there. And then, of course, everyone always asks for additional case studies and so forth. So, I'm not going to read through this because that would just be insanely boring. But the idea here is that depending on what part of the business you sit on in your organizations, whether it's visual merchandising, whether it's the category management itself and the microspace planning of the planogram, or if you're on the marketing or shopper marketing side and you're, have different tools and levers, the point here is that anything that can be visualized in a retail space can be visualized virtually and can be tested and can be measured. And if you measure it, then, because we're able to provide measurement to a lot of these things now, you can start to intelligently manage those things. So here's one case study around, very simple signage around the display. This was a very simple one, but it gets the point across. Coke and Walgreens had done some similar reset and revision. Very classic case study around, hey, it's time for a refresh. We need to change some things around. What do we do? What's the objective? Let's understand if those changes, let's do an A/B control test, control versus, sell a test, and then let's assess what happens after it. And not just from the sales impact perspective, which is the scanner data equivalent, but from the attitudinal, from the benefits, from the branding, from the, is it easier for my consumer to navigate, and all these, some of the other softer metrics that marketers, find more concerning. And then lastly, part of that is, some of the takeaways that we're here about. There was positive reception. Some of those softer metrics around satisfaction and likability were also up. The results happened to align with other research they've done, so that gave them internal confidence. This is one of their first studies they had done with us a while back. And then lastly, learning some other things around layout and packages that they might not have necessarily thought or occurred to have learned if they had done a full controlled store test. Lastly, the fourth part of today is, how do people use software to get started, right? So now at this point, everyone's usually like, okay, I get the process, I get what you've done. Wow, you've actually made an impact, but I understand it's not the technology I have to change too, but your technology allows me to actually, enable me to change the way I want to. Great. How do I get started? And there is no shortage of VR companies out there. There's actually tons of them, and they're very agency styled. And the whole point is that you sit down with them, and for a price within your budget, they'll have a solution for you. And the whole thing would be that they would get a whole bunch of 3D artists on staff. They would create something, and then there would be an experience that's designed around it. A lot of brand management and marketers use those experiences for trade shows, things like that, very custom projects. But if you're doing something in a systemic category reset process or something that's more intrinsic to a repeatable part of your business, that doesn't work. You need a system. You need a process. And because of that, we've developed software to enable that process. And what we believe is the easiest to use 3D manipulation software for people that aren't 3D artists. And so just a quick preview of what that is. And that's a video, and I will play it now. So this has a little background music to it, but I'll speak over it. Hopefully it's not in too much conflict. The idea here is that we've modeled over 75 3D environments, full environments retailer banners, especially in the U.S. And so the opportunity to navigate a store is just there. And what anyone can do is come into a store. They can come to their aisle of liking, aisle of choice. They drag a planogram in from their JDA file. They can just make it from scratch. They can bring some displays in. They could edit those displays, and then they can bring a sign in if they're, doing some shopper marketing. And the whole point of this is that, what are we in? Like 50 seconds into this video, I've just created an in-store experience, and if I happen to have a VR head-mounted device plugged into my computer, I can teleport myself right there to the store. That just cannot happen today. If you remotely wanted to do this, The poor man's version of this is, let me open up PowerPoint, let me bring a planogram in. I really can't do a 3D perspective to sell the vision. Maybe I have a friend in agency who's going to help me. You see where this is going, right? But in this case, in less than a minute, I just went to a store. I brought in a planogram of choice. I brought in a display that my agency might have already put into my library. I brought in a sign, and while we've been talking, I've also changed around an end cap to a very realistic situation where I'd have a ton of Captain Crunch at the end of my aisle. But the whole point is that I can do that in a minute. And if I don't like it, I can delete it and I can change that, right? I don't have to book an innovation center. So in the time it takes me to walk down a real aisle, I've actually just changed the entire aisle. And that's the point that that's the excitement of why I've left, what some of my work I used to work in the CPG space in concept testing and another part of the business for this technology because of the benefits it can bring to market in terms of just bringing costs down and allowing better decisions to come forward. So that's just a quick snippet of the software that we've made to accommodate repeat use cases, and that we see a lot of our clients applying themselves and applying virtual. And of course, because this is a webinar, there's always the shameless plug of, how do you do your design? And how do you do your research? And the whole point of this slide is that there are 4 levers to manipulate and pull, depending on what you're trying to test and what your budget is. How big do you want the study design is? How in-depth do you want the analysis? How in-depth do you need the deliverable and report outs to be? And how much time do you have? We work with clients that say, hey, I have 2 weeks. I'm thinking of, putting shelf strips instead of shelf tags into my aisle, and I really need to know if this is going to work. And then we go ahead and test that, and we come back to them, and this is a real case study, but they've saved millions of dollars on paper printing costs because we were able to virtually test something. They had the confidence. They implemented it in some stores because they didn't believe us at first. It worked, and they implemented it in their entire nationwide chain, right? And so there's that, and then we go all the way into the other side of the spectrum of, I have a new product and I only get 2 facings of it, and I'm in a big category and I want to redefine the category. Can I do something with? Okay, fine. Dude, you got a big study. How much time do you have? We need to figure this out, by the second half of the year. Okay, you've got time, right? So everything in between is testable. The point is, if you could do it in store, you could do it online more efficiently and with accuracy and confidence. And so with that, I'm open to questions. There's no question I won't take or won't like, and I hope everyone comes a lot of it and appreciate it.
Yep, we've got a couple of questions, and congratulations. That was an excellent presentation, and we did save the best for last, so good job. First question, do you have any real-world examples of how virtual has improved innovation at manufacturers and or retailers?
So innovation can mean a bunch of things. I'm going to answer the question with the definition that innovation means innovation in new products. So for example, line extensions or new product introductions. If it's innovation in process, I don't have any anecdotes beyond what I had already mentioned. And the answer is yes. And the very simple explanation is similar to how a client or a manufacturer would go in store and test something at the end of the aisle, or perhaps do a replacement, SKU rationalization or anything like that. We can test that as an A/B scenario through a change in a planogram. So we would have a client that says, here's my control. This is what the store looks like today. Here's my cell A with 2 new versions of flavors that I want to introduce, and here's cell B with the other 2 flavors I want to introduce, and here's cell 3 and 4 with the same thing but different amounts of facings and in different orders and arrangements. And then we would test all that, and then as long as our sample size was large enough, and this goes back to my last slide on which levers you want to pull in time and cost, then we can go down and itemize and say, hey, great, use this arrangement, do these flavors, that resonated more. Or we can even say things like, people actually looked at this flavor, but they ended up buying the other flavor. We find all sorts of weird things. I don't have a public case study to share, but that is a very common use case around innovation, assuming that's how innovation was intended to be asked.
Okay, next question. Do you have any specific examples of how virtual testing has increased sales?
So every case study is an example of that, or every project we do is in a case study of that. And I'll restate what I mentioned is that it's not necessarily that virtual reality increases sales. That is not true. And people say that because it's an easy way to just get around it, but applying technology does not increase sales. Applying technology allows you to test a bold decision, which then increases sales. And that's what we are enabling. And so we have a lot of studies that are literal garbage in, garbage out. Since I am not part of the manufacturer, there are some pieces of content that come across, and we've all been in this when you ask for a second opinion for someone. You say, hey, look at this. I changed the setup. I changed the aisle. I changed the package. I made the logo bigger. Right? All classic fun examples. What do you think? And the other person's like, it's not really different, right? And so we get a lot of those things. We test it, and it's not really different. And then some other people come over and they say, hey, I got some wacky ideas. Why don't we just put 8 of them in and see what bubbles to the top? And we, in fact, see things, and it's really fun in those cases because not everyone knows what's going to win or what's going to increase sales. And the best of what it is that as long as you have the right sample size, we not only tell you, hey, planogram version 1 increased sales versus planogram. It's not at the category level. We can actually say, well, and we've actually had some of these examples where, brand A is commissioning a study. They try a few things, and they have, let's say, three cells in the test, and it turns out that cell 2 increased category sales, but they decreased the sales for the commissioning brand. So they were actually able to increase their competitors' sales through the test, but they observed that. And we were able to itemize it, and then they were able to, basically hedge the risk on, okay, well, let's not go that direction. So, those are some of the fun examples that we see come through our systems.
Okay, last question. You said 85% of labor at shelf is unproductive, quote unquote. What exactly does that mean?
Yep. So that would be the idea that there is a lot of labor in category reset today, right? Let's say I have a new idea and I didn't do any testing, and I just say, okay, you know what? We're going to add a couple more facings. We're going to, maybe we're going to brand block instead of skew occasion block, or any of the arrangement strategies that category managers employ. And there's a lot of work in those rearrangements, whether it's rearranging the signage, and those retailers have to partner with you to make those changes. And because a lot of these initiatives aren't moving the needle and all these campaigns are kind of falling flat, then all of that associated labor then by default becomes unproductive. It's like, oh, we just put the stuff on one side of the aisle to the other side of the aisle. We thought we would get a lift. I don't know why, but we didn't. Well, why did we waste time putting stuff on the other side of the aisle, right? So those are the examples, and that's the labor. All the labor associated with those rearrangements is that what we're referencing.
Okay, well, that's all the questions that came in. But if anyone has further questions going forward, you can visit InContextSolutions.com or contact Jenkin.Lee at InContextSolutions.com. Great presentation about a cool technology. I learned a lot. Good job.
Great. Thanks. See you next time.